unelected leaders taking cover and hiding, all started by the current administration while the new administration was being confirmed. We share some of the quotes of our political leaders over the past 48 hours as our democracy is tested like never before. So, what does this have to do with the cannabis industry, you ask? Plenty, and we'll have that on We Talk News next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to the first 2021 edition of Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Rye Russell from Weed Buds Radio and your main man.
The transfer of power is confirmed. President-elect Joe Biden will be taking over for the current president, Donald J. Trump, on January 20th. Yes, America is great again because it survived the last 4 years. Now, the cannabis industry awaits what this new administration will do with this amazing plant that has been part of the political conversation during the pandemic when it became an essential part of the economy in the United States' legal states. Now, thanks to runoff elections in Georgia, Democrats will be in control of both houses of Congress. Their platform did include federal decriminalization, but while that might take a while to happen, the first ripples of this change, Mr. Rye Russell, have been felt in your portfolio that includes cannabis stocks.
It was a wild day if you were holding cannabis stocks on Wednesday, with the news of Georgia's process finally coming to a conclusion. Stocks were soaring, and with investors hoping that we're going to see some changes, I think that things are only starting to heat up here in the cannabis industry.
And as we look back at last year, 2020, regarding that cannabis industry, there have been over $1 billion in new legal states being sold, $1 billion in tax revenue collected in old states like Colorado, and a 6-ballot question win on election day, with 4 more states adopting adult use legalization, bringing that total to 15. And I believe the medical count now is at 36. So, needless to say, things are looking bright moving into 2021.
Mergers, acquisitions, and investments. Oh my, the cannabis industry will be the one to watch this year. And for more, let's go to Deborah Borchardt with the Green Market Report.
Thanks, guys. This week, the battle heated up between Sundial growers and Cannabis Investments, as it appears that Sundial is trying to take over Cannabis by being its creditor. Sundial subsidiary owns $51.9 million of the debt of Cannabis. Now, Cannabis did make a payment on that debt of $7 million at the end of the year, but Sundial still claims they're in default. Cannabis is fighting back. They're also saying that they are in major talks with a different company, but they wouldn't say who that was. Now, the year started out with a few new stocks. This week, Hemp Fusion Wellness completed their IPO of $17 million and began trading on the Toronto Stock Exchange with the symbol CBD.U. Canadian-based Eden Empire began trading on the CSC using the ticker symbol EDEN. They say they're going to operate retail cannabis stores in Canada and the US. They haven't really opened any yet. And the psychedelic drug development company Neon Mind began trading on the CSC as well, using the ticker NEON. And finally, Columbia Care is buying California-based dispensary, the Healing Center San Diego, for about $15 million. And that's it for this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt with the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
Thanks, Deborah. And as we continue to hope for these federal changes, it is still up to the states. And in the state of New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo has proposed legalization for the 3rd straight year. Except this time, proponents of legalization in New York can point to significant deficits as they need to legalize and use tax revenue to help balance some of this budget, with experts saying that New York is positioned for a $63 billion shortfall over the next few years. This might be the time.
And the timing is certainly right in that state just south of New York, New Jersey. And sure enough, The legislators there are working to finalize their new laws that allow adult use, recreational use of cannabis. One development has been to decriminalize underage cannabis possession crimes. So if you are under 21 and you are in possession of a cannabis ounce, about 30 grams or less, you'll be fined between $250 and $500, of course, depending on the amount you have on your possession. But at least it's not a criminal offense, it's a misdemeanor.
Well, that might be good news for some. I'm going to try not to get fines anymore these days. And so in Maine, Jimmy, Wellness Connection is at it again. They have opened another lawsuit stating that the state's residency requirement for participation in Maine's medical marijuana program violates their constitutional rights. And if you remember, Jimmy, they have fought this fight before. And because they received a favorable ruling in that case for the adult use market, they are challenging now the merits of these residency requirements for the medical program, showcasing just some of the inconsistencies between two markets here in Maine.
All eyes are always on the great state of Maine, but they've also been on our nation's capital over the last few days and the last few months just to see how quickly or how big a priority the new administration will be making for cannabis. Vote Pro podcast Phil Adams has our DC report. Phil?
Hi, this is Phil Adams from Vote Pro podcast, here with this week's We Talk News DC report. Merrick Garland, Joe Biden's presumed pick to be the new U.S. Attorney General, appears likely to defer to the Drug Enforcement Administration when it comes to decisions about the rescheduling of cannabis, based on his judicial record. The one-time Obama nominee for the Supreme Court was one of 3 judges on a D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals panel that upheld the DEA's denial of a petition to reschedule cannabis. During an oral arguments in the 2012 suit brought by Americans for Safe Access, Garland said of the DEA, quote, "We're not scientists, they are." Garland went on to uphold the agency's actions. Although he hasn't expressed publicly his views on legalization, Garland, like Biden, seems not particularly inclined to push for major changes to federal cannabis policy. With the Democrats set to reclaim control of the U.S. Senate, the prospects for federal cannabis legalization appear to have significantly improved. Under outgoing GOP Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the upper chamber of Congress has repeatedly thwarted recent attempts at cannabis reform legislation. New York Senator Chuck Schumer has pledged to bring federal legislation to the Senate floor, saying, quote, "We'll have a good chance to pass it." Schumer is expected to take McConnell's place as Majority Leader. Both senators-elect from Georgia, whose runoff victories secured Democratic control, are on record as supporting cannabis legalization. A bill to legalize cannabis for adult use in Virginia has been filed in the state's General Assembly. Delegate Steve Heretic introduced the bill, which would allow adults 21 or older to purchase and possess up to an ounce of cannabis. It would also allow adults to grow up to 3 mature plants and 3 immature plants for personal use. In a press release, Heretic said, quote, "This bill is built upon the lessons of other states throughout the country, which have enacted similar reforms." That's the We Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
Illinois is just 1 year into their adult use legalization program, and they are already setting all sorts of records. Perhaps the most important one is the fact that their governor, J.B. Pritzker, has now expunged over 500,000 records of low-level, mostly under 1 ounce of possession cannabis records and crimes. Even those who were arrested for more than that will have a process through the court system that they can get that record expunged through petition. Now, we'll have to see what happens in Illinois, but Rye, what's going on with the hemp world?
Well, there may be some good news for those of you in the hemp industry. There is a bill in the Senate that would help address some of the concerns facing hemp farmers and THC limits. This proposal would raise that limit to 1%. And this could have some very significant consequences for the hemp industry because it was only 0.3% THC. So this could be a huge opportunity for farmers and a huge opportunity to keep crop where it belongs. And now let's go to Solomon Israel from MJ Biz Daily's International with the Canadian Report.
I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily International, and this is the Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. A digital breach at Aurora Cannabis has exposed the personal information of current and former Aurora employees. A source who was a victim of the breach told Marijuana Business Daily that the data exposed included personal information like home addresses and banking details. Aurora confirmed the breach, but would not confirm the kinds of information exposed or how many people were affected. Total executive compensation at cannabis producer Hexo grew almost 20% on an annual basis in its 2020 fiscal year. CEO Sebastian St. Louis got a 26% raise to 11.2 million Canadian dollars in 2020. That's despite the fact that Hexo posted a net loss of more than $500 million Canadian dollars for that fiscal year. And Ontario-based grower WeedMD has joined the trend of cannabis facility closures in Canada. WeedMD is shutting down a research, processing, and fulfillment site in Bowmanville, Ontario, to centralize operations at a different location. You can read all those stories and more at mjbizdaily.com. I'm Solomon Israel for Marijuana Business Daily.
Thank you, Solomon. Now, a lot of you might have heard of the name of Steve Dangelo. Many in California have referred to him as the father of the cannabis industry. He's also one of the founders of Harborside, a dispensary in California that's been open since the beginning of their medical program. And now Steve Dangelo is stepping aside from Harborside and to focus a little bit more on his nonprofit entity, the Last Prisoner Project, which of course is trying to get every person that is in jail for a cannabis crime out of jail, getting their records expunged. Needless to say, he's going to be very happy with what's going on in Illinois, but I'm not sure he's so happy with this article that Politico put out about his charity, that Last Prisoner Project. And they're already questioning the amount of money that the Last Prisoner Project has raised and how they have raised it. Now, this is so typical of many nonprofits that always have their records looked at through a microscope, because everybody knows when you give a donation to a nonprofit, you'd like 100% of that donation to go to that nonprofit. But the reality is, these are big organizations. And sometimes that dollar that you donate has to go to the actual organization itself to keep it afloat. Now, their executive director is Sarah Gertzen, and she basically said that, you know what? She really believes that they've been absolutely collaborative in their mission and their work. And Rye, this is just, I think, another example of a new industry going through some growing pains, even on the nonprofit side.
Absolutely. Businesses and nonprofits are very similar, but they're very different. In how you process the accounting and the finances, it's challenging. It's not something I would ever do on my own. And so hopefully they've got some good accountants that can help them.
I'm sure they do. And I can actually recommend a great accountant named Rick Leneve of Accounting Buds. Just so happens he's one of our favorites and one of our experts here at Pro Cannabis Media. But speaking of experts, Rye Russell, I've been so impressed with you, not only in your delivery and how passionate you are about your great state of Maine, but today you actually shared your own personal cannabis journey with me. I wonder, and I appreciate you said you'd be willing to share that with our audience. So take it away, right?
Sure. Well, thank you, Jimmy. And it's not something that, I keep secret, but it's not necessarily something that, I'm broadcasting all of the time, because we're so fortunate that we get to meet so many amazing people. But cannabis is something that's deeply personal for me, as it is for most. And growing up, my dad's parents, both of them were Episcopal ministers, and they had their viewpoints, and my parents certainly had theirs. And it was just something that not only were we kind of afraid of it, there was just so much lack of education regarding cannabis. And so when you fast forward to the point that I decided that this was something for my health, and my doctors and like real professionals, went on this journey because I was so nervous, and I was so nervous to talk to my family about it. That I was really scared. And eventually I had weed buds to kind of allow me to explore this and feel safe. But I still wasn't putting it on my own socials or anything. And eventually, as the show grew, I knew that it was going to become time that somebody in my family would see it. And so I called my grandparents at the time. I had 3 living grandparents, and I needed my significant other to sit with me while I explained to the 3 of them that and it was just everything. I needed their approval before I could even bother with my parents. And I sat there, and I'll never forget, my significant other and I just like I was grabbing their hand and just sweating profusely. Like, these are my grandparents. These are 3 of my best friends in the world. And I started to just slowly go down this journey with them about how I got there and then how I'm kind of monetizing that research. And all 3 of them died laughing. And I'm seriously, Jimmy, as I explained to you, like, I was in tears for days leading up to this meeting. And I know that they love me, and I knew that there would be some sort of common ground we would end on, but I really did not know how that was going to go. And they just, I'm so, like, it's so special, like the love and support that the 3 of them gave me. And after the conversation, I realized that my grandmother was exploring and researching these products, and my grandfather, who was in the late stages of his cancer treatments, he was using it to reduce a lot of the negative consequences and side effects of the cancer treatments. And we're all sitting there at breakfast, and they asked me how I was going to approach my parents. And I was, joking with them. I hope you guys were. But, I knew that I was going to have that conversation. And it went okay. My parents loved me, but I knew that they did not see what we see. And they never really had any experience or exposure, except my dad would tell me stories. And Jimmy, you might be able to appreciate this. Of, I had a friend that smoked weed and it was laced with PCP and he cut off his arm. Well, my dad had that friend for everything. And so it was something that, like, he was just very, very concerned with. But I got the love and support that parents can give. And you fast forward, the more that my father started to understand how cannabis played a role in those late stages of my grandfather's life, and the way that my grandmother uses it as a part of her wellness regimen now, that I'll never forget that he said to me, he said, if this really works to the point that it gave my father this level of quality of life, or any level of quality of life, I don't even care if it made him better for 1 minute and 6 months. Every parent deserves that, especially at the end of life. And then with the stocks, growing, and, through conversations over the past year, my dad would ask me about different companies in the space, and how can you trust companies, and how can you vet companies? And of course, I tell him to watch our friend Deborah at the Green Market Report, and to tune into us. But we started to talk about it more. And it got to the point where, he's like, I'm investing in this, and I really think that there should be access. And I don't know if I'm there yet for everybody, but I know that if you're 65 or older, you should, like, you've given the world everything you have to give us. And if this is what you want, you should have access to that product. And that type of just family communication, that type of empathy, that type of willingness to grow, and to just really come together as a family, was something that was really, really special for us. And I hope that as this industry continues to get attention and education, that hopefully more families can start to have conversations, similar to that.
Absolutely. And I think that journey, many of us have to go through with people that we love, not just their circle of life and helping out at end of life care, but also just coming clean and explaining the benefits of the plant to the parents that were probably freaked out the first time that they actually found out that one of their children was using cannabis. So we've made quite a bit of progress now as a society, and I certainly can see how challenging it was in your family too. And luckily, your dad came around, and now he accepts it, and he's got a little skin in the game, as they say.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great story, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us, because that's what we want to do here at Pro Cannabis Media. Is we want to be the place where people do feel comfortable sharing their stories with others. So I appreciate everyone watching another edition of Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Rye Russell from Weed Buds Radio.
Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media, supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge, and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.